Fathers have one of the most important roles in our society. They help form their daughters and sons, hold families together, provide and protect, and the fathers of today, by the way, create the men of tomorrow. If a society has weak men, it's a reflection of that society's fathers. But masculinity and fatherhood have been under attack, and fathers have basically disappeared. We've seen fatherlessness rates dramatically rise and have watched as men shrink into the background of our culture. The real question I have is, where have all the men gone? Anthony Mackie, the Marvel actor, recently went viral for sharing his thoughts on this.
It's just that thing of, in the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities, for one reason or another. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. Right. But my boys will always be respectful. They will always say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am. They will always say thank you. They will always open a door for a lady. They will always make sure that their mother is taken care and provided for. They will always be men.
He's absolutely right. Manhood is under attack, and men need to be raising men. I have boys myself, and I'm teaching them the exact same things. Being a strong man is about doing what's right, protecting the house and the wife, regardless of what's popular. Being a strong man is about loving your family and friends and being willing to sacrifice for their betterment. But most importantly, being a man is about being humble enough to acknowledge our Creator and to love Him. Fathers have always been critical to society and always will be. If we want to create a future worth living, if we want to save America, we need strong fathers to be even stronger. We need fathers who will serve as examples of strength to their son. And I am so glad there are very few people here today who I look to as examples of strength and masculinity and good fathers and husbands more than our guest today, Jack Posobiec. Jack, welcome to the show.
Terry, a pleasure to be here, man. And congrats on the new podcast.
Well, yeah, you know, if it doesn't get canceled over this first episode, I would love to have you on. You are someone of great depth that I could talk to all day. But listen, obviously masculinity is under attack, and it's not just one area, but one of the biggest areas where it has come under attack is obviously Hollywood. There's Snow White had a huge flop at the box office. Jack, I'm sure you saw these reviews: lazy, visually repellent from The Independent, exhaustingly awful, The Guardian, Disney has trashed its reputation by the Times. Jack, it seems that this might be rooted somewhere. Can we play clip A or clip B, please?
No longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that.
Jack, interesting clip here. You know, it seems to me that these fairy tales were written, I think, in the 17th and 18th centuries when women actually wanted to be protected. You know, Snow White is obviously the tale of a poor young woman that gets kicked out of the kingdom and is in the forest all alone with these dangerous animals, needs some help. The idea that we would be not wanting a man to come and save her is quite interesting. What type of message do you think Disney is sending to not just girls, but to boys all across America?
Well, Terry, it's really interesting. And, you know, Snow White, or as I've been calling it on my show, Human Events Daily, we call it Snow Woke. This latest one, it's a massive flop for Disney. They've lost hundreds of millions of dollars on this. I mean, how do you ruin Snow White, right? You know, you think about it on you know, the first basis, it's like, it doesn't make sense. It's one of the most straightforward Disney movies. By the way, this Snow White was the picture that made Disney what it is today, what put it on the map. This is what took Walt Disney and made it to be the seminal theater experience for kids. You know, this is what put Walt Disney on. It wasn't Mickey. People think it was Mickey. It actually wasn't Mickey. Notice there are no big Mickey Mouse movies. It's actually Snow White was the big one, taking this timeless story, which is now 200 years old, from the Brothers Grimm in Germany, and translating it into this absolutely beloved masterpiece of the celluloid screen there on where Walt Disney himself was involved with this, and just making it an incredible story about the virtue of women and the, fighting against the corrupting influence, the damsel in distress, saved by the knight. It's a classic tale with classic archetypes. And so people would say, how do you mess that up? And I always respond, well, because when you have companies like the Disney that have been totally infiltrated by communists, and funny enough, Walt Disney himself testified to Congress when he was still alive that Hollywood was being infiltrated by communists, and he said that he could see it himself on the sets, that as it turns out, his own company would be taken over it. And I say, the destruction is the point. This is cultural vandalism. What they're doing is a number of things. They're stripping gender roles away. So they're messing around with biology. They're messing around with gender. They're pitting women and men against each other. That's what you heard her there. She, referring to the story as dated, referring to Prince Charming as a stalker, saying that he's not someone that, should ever be looked up to by young men. But then she's also telling young women that, what do you need to do to matter in life? You need to be a girl boss. You need to go on this completely other, this other path that's set out for you, and that just being a woman isn't enough. When in fact, in the original story, which everyone remembers, Snow White's beauty is the essence that Snow White has from the moment she is born. And this actually is the female hero's journey, or the heroine's journey, if you will, is the protection of the virtue that women already have. Men, on the other hand, we have to go and seek virtue, right? That's the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, or the monomyth, if you want to get into any of that stuff, is the idea that men have to go out and slay the dragon, face the challenge, grow, and then we become heroes. But for women, it's about protecting virtue. It's about not falling for the trap of the poison apple, which, of course, by the way, is an obvious reference to the book of Genesis. So it's very clear. It goes all the way back to some of the oldest stories in Western civilization, and so it doesn't surprise me for a second that the cultural Marxists in Hollywood would seek to degrade this, because that is the point. The degradation and the destruction of these traditional stories is their goal.
Well, Jack, I mean, here's the most basic question I have, though. What is wrong with Prince Charming saving a princess? Right? Like, I'm going to say something very offensive, and I'm sure you agree with me, is I think women need men. And frankly, I think men need women. I think that how God designed it is that we both kind of need each other. And it's a very beautiful thing. We complete each other. We complement each other. And this whole note, you said it earlier, they are just dividing men against women. There's no need for this conflict here. Men love women and women love men, and we both need each other. Why? Like, who benefits from these types of ridiculous divisions?
Well, who benefits from divisions? Again, I wrote a whole book about this last year. It went to New York Times bestseller about communist revolutions. And I said, this is the type of thing.
Unhumans, buy it now. Unhumans, get it anywhere.
This is the type of thing that you see in a communist attempted takeover of a system. It's the subversion of institutions. And what more powerful institution is there than the institution of the family itself? The oldest institution that I said, we were at the the NATO conference, the great conference there in Austin, Texas. Had the opportunity to see you there, and fantastic honor to be included in that. And I said something there that the nuclear family unit is the oldest institution that we have evidence for on planet Earth. It predates the Bible, literally predates the writings of the Bible. And you go to the cavemen, and they go into the caves, and the anthropologists dig into these caves, and they dig up. What do they find? Mom, dad, kids. It's right there. It is the oldest institution of all of humanity. And so when you look at the communist and you say, what if the communist looks at that, and the communist is resentful? Why? The communist hates society. The communist hates civilization. The communist hates humanity. And ultimately, the communist hates God for creating the communist to begin with, and hates life itself. And so what do they seek to do? They seek to subvert, to destroy, and to ultimately degrade everything in a society so that they can then take total control. What's the best way to do that? You find the divisions. So with the original Marxism, that was class. So class division, you get the peasantry and the serfs in Russia to go up against the aristocrats and the czar, and you kill him and you bayonet his children to death in a basement, which is exactly what happened to the czar's children, the Christian Russians of Tsar Nicholas. than in the new communism, because in America we have this, at least we had this middle class, and until the Democrats took it away. Donald Trump is working on that, bringing them back. But you have this big middle that isn't easy to rile up. So what do? You divide along ethnic lines, you divide along gender lines, and then you pit everyone against each other. And that's exactly what the communists are doing.
Jack, speaking of another movie or story that Disney is going to attempt to ruin, I know that you've been sending out warnings online on X to the new recreators of the Narnia series. But I was just reading that, I grew up on C.S. Lewis, right? I read every book from The Magician's Nephew all the way to, The Last Battle. These stories were pivotal in my childhood, but they're remaking The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they're giving this adaptation a new twist. Apparently, they've offered the speaking role of Aslan, who you and I know, if you've read these stories, he represents God. He actually represents Jesus. He dies for the land of Narnia so that they can be saved from the Queen. But they offered that role to Meryl Streep to voice Aslan over Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson was the one that did it last time, but they want to replace this. The left has this obsession. It's like an inferiority complex or something, where they're trying to make God the male. By the way, Aslan is obviously a male. It's a male lion. Like if you read all the depictions, males have these manes, and female lions do not have those manes. But what's your thoughts on this? Do you think they're actually going to go through it? All I know is that they've offered this to Meryl Streep.
That's been the report. I don't know that if it's officially come out yet. Again, it wouldn't surprise me, because what did we talk about before? Cultural degradation of beloved stories. Look, and this one's personal for me. This has been Narnia has been my favorite book series since I was a kid. Exactly like you said. Although we can argue about the proper order of the books later, I'm sure, because the original order, it starts with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as the first book. And but you're right. In that book, the cutting off of the mane of Aslan is seminal to the actual plot of the book. And spoiler alert, it's based on the New Testament. It's based on the Gospels. And so the cutting off of Aslan's fur and the cutting off of his mane and in fact even his hair is essentially akin to the scourging of Christ at the pillar and the crowning of thorns prior to the crucifixion. So this is this idea that he is humiliated, that he is tortured. What's the best way to humiliate a lion? Of course, you would shear his mane. By the way, they're doing an adaptation of that at the Museum of the Bible right now, which we happened to catch last week. It was absolutely fantastic, incredibly faithful to the original. My kudos to the entire cast and the team at the Museum of the Bible and the Logos Theater. I understand it's going to be playing through April, and then they're going to Branson. Just go see it. Literally, if you can, just hop on a plane and go see it. Or if you get to Branson, go see it in Branson. It's amazing. You need to see this and protect Narnia at all costs. But so to turn it into a female character, again, this is part of the cultural degradation, the idea of subverting tropes, of subverting things. And by the way, who is making Netflix Narnia? Well, it's Greta Gerwig. What did Greta Gerwig do prior to this? Well, a lot of people don't know is that Greta Gerwig was, in fact, involved with that Snow White movie. No, she wasn't the main writer, but she did actually do one revision of the Snow White draft. We don't know exactly how much, but we do know that she was involved with the Snow White project. And prior to that, she did the Barbie movie, which was this massive pink juggernaut that everybody saw. But I feel like most people didn't actually pay attention to the content of the film, because if you did, you would see that the entire film is about the battle of the sexes and the subversion of the nuclear family. Wow, where have I seen that before? So the very first scene of the Barbie movie that Greta Gerwig made, she's now doing Narnia. First scene of the Barbie movie is little girls destroying their baby dolls. Everyone knows girls love baby dolls. Why? Because girls are naturally inclined to want to have children. Like this is the way people basically work. Again, I talked about how it goes back hundreds and thousands of years. And they set these dolls on fire. It's also kind of like a quasi-abortion allegory type scene.
I remember thinking that same thing.
And then Greta Gerwig has Barbie essentially, fighting against Ken for the entire film. And the film culminates with a climax where a feminist consultant is hired by Barbie to teach all of the Barbies that they don't have to listen to Ken anymore. And I kid you not, this is the actual plot of the film. They pass a constitutional amendment in Barbie land to strip Ken of his rights. So that's who you've got running Narnia.
My God, Netflix. Save us all. We need to stay on top of this because Narnia must be protected at all costs. It's one of the most beautiful stories. By the way, did you see this is Pink Pony Club lady, Clip C, Chapel Rowan? Can we play that?
But kids, all of my friends who have kids are in hell. I actually don't know anyone who's like happy and has children at this age. I have like a 1-year-old, like 3-year-old, 4 and under, 5 and under. I literally have not met anyone who's happy.
Jack, I don't know about you, but that Chapel Rowan does not seem. Anytime I've ever talked to someone that is talking like this and does her makeup like this, she seems like a miserable person. So that's probably a reflection of who her friends are. But I mean, I saw that video. I'm thinking like, if you're a parent and you hate your life because of your children, like maybe the children aren't the problem. Maybe the problem is you're a terrible person. I mean, look, I don't get as much sleep as I could, but she's obviously not wrong about that. And Jack, you've got kids, but like, what is this weird? Like, what I've noticed is that the people that complain the most about not wanting to have children are always the people that don't have any.
I will say this about having kids. It's one of those things where, yeah, when you're in the moment, you can be tired, you can be sleep deprived. I'm sitting here. Last night was an election night, so I was up till like 1 a.m. with Charlie Kirk streaming, and then I was on the phone with other political operative types and consultants till about 2 a.m. And then I still had to wake up at 6:30 to get my kid ready for school and get him to school. Took him to Catholic school this morning, and it's one of those deals where it's like, what? There are times where you're dragging, you're running slow, but then you step back for a second and you think, I wouldn't trade this for anything in the world. And I thank God every single day for every single second I get to spend with my children, because it is the greatest reward of my entire life. There's, I don't care if I could be penniless and lose every, follower I had on social media. As long as I had my family, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care for a second. I could walk away from all this and like not even care for a minute as long as I have my wife and my kids. So the idea is, people like that, they desperately want it to be true. Candace Bushnell, and I got it into over X, a couple of years back. She is the founder of Sex and the City. And she actually said at one point that she regretted herself not having children. And I really do think that Sex and the City was sort of the plague ship of this second wave feminism of, you don't need to have kids. You can just go off to the city and have the high powered job and have your friends and date all the guys. And it doesn't matter what you do because you're just living your life and you be you, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a lie. It's a total lie. It's a bill of goods. And young women were sold a bill of goods. Young men were too. But Sex and the City was this massive cultural phenomenon that unfortunately sold the wrong advice to young women. And Candace Bushnell admitted this once. And though she later recanted it because I guess she was doing like some, revival. They were doing like a reboot of the show or some movies or something. So she tried to walk it back. And I on Twitter, and I just started firing receipts at her of like videos and transcripts of her having said it in the past. So she blocked me. So I cry myself tonight to sleep every single night knowing that the founder of Sex and the City has blocked me for her, basically her admitting that her own life's work has been a complete failure.
And it has been. And by the way, like, I don't know anyone that has been clamoring for a Sex and the City reboot. Like, not interesting. I never got the gist of the show in the first place. One thing, though, Jack, I hate being too negative because there is reason for major optimism. Did you see this latest movement in the polls amongst Zoomers? 18 to 29, President Trump's approval rating amongst those 18 to 29 years old has climbed to 52.7% in February. I mean, Jack, this is a big deal. Like they kept trying to convince us that it all was lost, that there's no hope. Abandon all hope, ye who enter. But it turns out that Gen Z is looking for a little bit different than what they got from this boomer generation.
What's really interesting about this is when it comes down to it is, and this was Atlas Intel, which is a very, very reputable source, that one thing about Zoomers that Zoomers crave more so, way more than baby boomers, than Gen X, than Gen Y, than millennials. They crave authenticity. They grew up in a world of lies. They grew up in a world surrounded by propaganda and disinformation and misinformation and personalities that would just lie to them. And the thing that I think Gen Z has realized about President Trump is that he actually doesn't lie. He actually does tell you the truth. He tells you exactly what he believes. He tells you exactly what he wants to do. And he points out the lies that have been running the world and governing the world prior to his recent ascension to power. And so the reason that he rose to power and the reason that they are flocking to him is because they view him as sort of this beacon of truth that's being weaponized against the lies that are surrounding them in the entire world. And, think of it in the Biden administration alone. They would sit there and tell you that inflation isn't real, that prices aren't going up, that it's great to buy a house, that anyone can buy a house, that anyone can have the American dream. And meanwhile, Zoomers are sitting there. They've got tons of college debt the same way millennials do. They're trying to figure out how to just survive, how to pay rent. They're trying to enter into the workforce. And they were saying for so many years that, this was happening during COVID. This was happening when we were under lockdowns. This was happening when fake jobs were being flooded into Silicon Valley and paid for by by this phony money printing at the Fed. And then all of us, people realized that it was all a joke and then it all fell apart and they were trying to figure out what happened. And meanwhile, people are saying we can't afford basic subsistence and you're telling us everything's great. There's a war in Ukraine, there's a war in Israel, and people are like, what gives? Gen Z is asking for someone to just turn it all off and get things back right. And that's exactly what President Trump is about. President Trump gives it straight, and that's exactly what Gen Z likes. They want subsistence, and they want things that are actually authentic. That's President Trump. He's the one man in politics that doesn't play this sort of happy talk game that you'll get from people of all different generations. Now, obviously a baby boomer himself, but Trump is generationally, but he's clearly a man who exists sort of outside of time because he is a singular figure. And I think there's a reason that authenticity that Gen Zers are craving comes from Trump, and that is exactly what they gravitate towards.
Ever since Trump came on the scene, I have been kind of obsessed with him because it made no sense at the time when he was rising because he went so against the conventional wisdom, right? He's saying all these quote unquote offensive things. He's upsetting people. He's attacking John McCain, which by the way, he was the smartest guy ever because he put together the fact that no one hated John McCain more than Republicans. But one thing, Jack, that I'll tell you is that I think that you're right. I think it's Trump and what he's done to the Republican Party. It's much more consistent and authentic and real. And it's gritty, right? Like we don't shy away from these fights and we call things out for how it is. But one thing that I know, one headline that caught me was for the first time in modern U.S. history, men are just as likely to be religious as women. And by the way, if you read the story, you find out that this change it's not being driven by the boomers. It's being driven by the Zoomers. It's young men that are actually the ones that are filling up the church pews on Sunday mornings, not the old timers. There's a huge shift going on with America's youth. What is going on in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same answer as before. So it's that craving for authenticity. And there is nothing more real than the greatest story ever told, which, we're here it's Lent right now. We're coming up on Easter. We're coming up on the Holy Week, that there's nothing more real than the greatest story ever told, that God gave his only son to the world who could be sacrificed so that we can have immortal life. And by the way, the truth of that is so clear to young people. It's way more real than anything else that they can find in society. And guess what? The types of churches that they're going to, when it's in the evangelical side, and our great friend Charlie Kirk, it is someone that I kind of use to kind of peer into that window since I'm not there myself, is he says there it's the traditional Bible-based churches that people are going towards. By the way, I happened to attend a Episcopal service because I went to the national prayer service with President Trump and J.D. Vance the day after the inauguration, where they had this just horrific, I guess, some kind of Anglican bishop there at the National Cathedral. She was awful. She was horrific. What are people going towards? They're going towards the traditional Orthodox Christian churches. That's what's attracting Gen Z. In the Catholic Church, where I reside, Polish, we pretty much only come in one flavor with that. People are going towards the Latin Mass. Why are they gravitating towards the Latin Mass, particularly Gen Z? Why does that have appeal? Again, because it's authentic, because it's the purest form of the Mass that they can find. It is not modern. It is, in fact, classic and timeless. It holds those timeless values. You have to work for it. It's not something that, it comes easily. It's literally in an ancient language, a quote unquote dead language, even though it's used primarily. And I love going, and I love going as well. I love taking my kids, and I'm just not going to stop. And I think this revival that's going on, it's really a reawakening here in the United States, and it's happening around the world. Narnia coming back is a huge part of that, and I hope that they'll be able to correct some of the issues that we're talking about here. But I really do think that God, to kind of borrow the phrase from Narnia, God is on the move. Christ is on the move. He is the King of the universe, and he is making all of these changes happen. And I think that Gen Z can sense that the same way that everyone around the world, billions of people, saw Donald Trump saved miraculously from an assassin's bullet that was within 1/2 an inch of his brain on national television in a field in Butler, Pennsylvania. And when people see a miracle like that, they have to respond.
That was the only CNN rally that CNN aired, wasn't it?
Funny how that works.
Well, listen, while we're still on the topic of hope, not all of Hollywood is lost. Chris Pratt, by the way, is a great example.
I was baptized Catholic, and we weren't a big church-going family. And I had a few different moments through the course of my life where I really felt called to God and gave my heart to Jesus. The most profound was probably around 19 or 20 years old, living in Maui. The most impactful moment was when my son was born. He was born early and had some health scares, and in that moment really made some deals with God. And as you do when you're praying, and I felt like, if you save my son, I will give you everything.
So I saw that clip, man, and it just you ever see something, it's usually like these military videos of guys coming home to their families and their children. Those always kill me. But that, I saw that clip and it just hit me right in the heart because it reminded me of my dad. And, a lot of people, my dad died 4 years ago, and he had cancer, and he's 57 years old, but I'm the eldest of 10 kids, and he and my wife, my mom had a very good, happy marriage, but it wasn't always happy. And, I think, Jack, we might have talked about this, but my dad, I was almost the eldest of only 4 kids. When my mom was pregnant with number 4, she filed for divorce against my dad because, he grew up in the 80s, at the start of the crack epidemic, and he got caught up in that. And, they didn't know how bad this stuff was at the time, but my dad just wasn't coming home. He wasn't getting clean. And so my mom, as a last resort, filed for divorce. Well, my dad came from a broken home. His parents didn't go to church. They were both alcoholics, not in recovery. When he was dying in his final days, I had a lot of time with him, and because I'm the eldest, when you're the eldest, you have to really fill in a lot of the gaps that the other kids don't. But everyone actually really pulled together and did great work. But as we were talking, I asked him, I said, "Why'd you get clean? What was behind that?" And he gave, he obviously gave credit to God. None of this would have been able to happen without him. Gave a ton of credit to my mom, but he said that the driving force, the thing that motivated him, was the kids. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, "I didn't want you guys to go through the same life that I had. And I knew that if I didn't break this cycle now, that you all would end up in the same boat that I was in. I wanted to break that cycle." And it was that moment in that conversation, these are sacred moments, when it's someone's final months, final days, final weeks, they're really careful about what they say. They're very deliberate about what they do and everything. But it hit me in that we all know that parents form their children. Obviously, we have an impact on our kids. But it was that moment where I realized that your kids kind of form you too, right? And I'm just wondering, like, has that been in your experience since becoming a father and a husband? Like, would you say that your kids in certain ways are forming you?
Oh, wow. Well, I'll say, first off that, it's just an incredible story, Terry. And I remember when all that happened and, we were praying so hard for you, Tanya and I, and your family, and your dad was just a great guy. And it was just so great to have the opportunity to meet him at Trump Hotel a couple of times and, spend some time with him. And, you're right. Your children do form you in many ways, because when you have your kids, you have to realize something. It's like, wait a minute, this is a little person who looks up to me and says, I'm your hero, right? You are my role model. You're my superhero. You are the strongest person in the world, the smartest person in the world. My dad is still my hero. My dad is still, he's always been my hero my entire life. I have this image of my father that I'll never, ever shake, where he's just my hero, right? He's the person who can do everything. But then at the same time, you also have to realize that as the person who is now stepping into that role, that wait a minute, you actually have to deserve it. You actually have to form yourself and conduct yourself and discipline yourself to be the kind of person who's deserving of that belief in you, in your children. Because guess what? When you're a dad, your family literally depends on you. That means everything you do, every move you make, it's all about keeping their lives together, raising them, putting them on the right path. It is incredible. It's an honor, but it's also a responsibility, and it is a duty. So like, you got to wake up and say, wait a minute. All right, these people will literally die if I do not do my job and do my duty and get, so that's, or this morning it's just not make it to school or something like that. If I don't drag myself up out of bed, doesn't matter how late the election was. It doesn't matter, things, didn't go our way in Wisconsin or whatever it is. No, it doesn't, to them, it doesn't matter, because guess what? They're going to be there every single day. And so that driving duty, it gives you purpose. It centers you. It makes you whole. It makes you understand so many things about the world that maybe you didn't understand before. And living through that and I've had these conversations with my wife as well, with Tanya. It really brings out sides of yourself and activates things that you didn't even know that you had, but you had them all along because God gifted them to you to be used in this purpose. And when you realize that having children, and I understand there's different families out there, different people have situations out there, but when you really realize that so much of what we have is so that we can have and raise children. And this is one of the most incredible things about women, by the way, right? Like, I would say to Tanya, my gosh, she's learned, she's a linguist, so she's learned all these different languages in her life, but it takes years of study to learn a language. But I said, what a miracle it is that she didn't have to do anything to learn to make a human life, right? Her body can just do it. Women can just do that. It's the most incredible superpower on the face of the planet, and women have it as soon as they are born. They have it, in fact, as soon as they're conceived. They're not, literally, but they have the all of the ingredients that they need, and it's the most important, really, thing in society, I think, that needs to be protected and preserved.
Well, look, I think real men are fathers, and they fight for their country. They embrace responsibility despite their past. And I also think that real men are proud of their kids. I want to. Did you see this video of 48, otherwise known as JD Vance, and his kids? Normalize children in public again. Jack, this is so beautiful. I love this administration is like the big family administration.
I think that's when JD's at Notre Dame, isn't it?
Yeah, he's at Notre Dame. Yeah, the Cathedral Notre Dame in France. And it's just so beautiful. This administration is bringing kids everywhere. It's so good. This is like the exact type of message that we should be giving to young people, and the exact example that we should be giving to young people, don't you think?
There's a phrase that I used at NatalCon, and it's not my phrase, but it's something that it comes from church, and they say, look, if your church ain't crying, it's dying. And what does that mean? So it means that when people say, oh my gosh, can you keep your kids quiet? Your children are being unruly, and you get those sort of like nasty looks. Everybody knows those people when you're at a restaurant, whether at a church, wherever it might be. And obviously you don't want little kids like that in a movie, but hear me out. And that's why in churches, you would have like an area for the kids. It's usually in the back. The moms go there, and it's great. It's set up for them. Sometimes there's water, sometimes there's coffee, whatever it might be, little, snack or something. But the point being is, if your church, your parish isn't producing children, then something is wrong. If your movement is not producing children, something is wrong. If your society, if your civilization is not producing children, which, by the way, that's the situation we're in with fertility rates in this country, then something is off. And what's gone off is this complete imbalance in society where men have been pushed down, women have been like propped up, where we tell women that they can be men and we tell men that they should be women, and everything is completely off. So the way you do that is you very simply restore the traditional biological, natural law, Bible-oriented gender roles that were designed by God. And then guess what? You get your family back, and from family, a family-centered society will be a successful society as long as you keep those roles exactly where they're meant to be. And then it's all contained in the original Snow White. The closer that we can get to that society, the more successful we will be.
Jack, thank you so much for coming on to our very first episode. As long as this doesn't get canceled after this one, I want to have you back on. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for everything you're doing in this country, and thank you for coming on, man.
God bless, Terry. By the way, I remember American Principles was one of my very first political interviews, so I suppose I returned you. I owed you a favor for being your first interview.
Thank you so much, brother. God bless you, and keep up the great work.
Take care, man.
Well, that is our very first podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. I had a great time, and I know Jack did too. America is at a crossroads. We can keep rejecting fatherhood, family, and faith, or we can make the hard choice to become the country our founding fathers envisioned. Nothing worth doing is easy. Hard work, though, doesn't mean bad. It just means worthwhile. The hardest work is always the most fruitful. We need to return our country back on track to faith, family, and freedom. This has been the Terry Schilling Show. Have a great life.